And one of the issues discussed by the NGOs and by civil society in the Rio summit was certainly the issue of international marine conservation. And this is a matter of urgency. Everybody felt it was a matter of urgency, but it was unfortunately not one of the key elements of the Rio conference. There have been so many. The menu was so rich that at the end of the day, there was something mentioned in the conclusions, but nobody was really satisfied, and we have all but a clear picture on what we are facing for the future. And then I know there is a lot of progress that was made in specific areas over the last years, certainly. And I remember, indeed, I have an academic background. I'm just a lawyer, I know, but I specialized in European law and public international law, and it was in the mid-80s when everybody discussed UNCLOS, when we discussed the, what was it, seabed regime, is that so correct? So, and a colleague of mine, Jens Gaster, has written a doctoral thesis next door to me on seabed regime, so I learned a lot of details from him, and also then I asked the question, well, you are discussing the legal aspects of it, but what about the environmental aspects of deep sea mining? Can we really overlook the long-term consequences of it? And do we have enough of consciousness in the international public debate? We don't have. And this was, dear Klaus Töpfer, why I, when I returned back home from Rio, have inserted in my 10-point program until next general election a point where I said, well, we need on the international scene flexible forms of cooperation that facilitate action and include varying participants who elaborate results within an appropriate time frame, coalitions of the committed. An appropriate topic seems to be the question of ocean protection, which was insufficiently addressed in Rio. That was a clear message that I got from NGOs and civil society, and today I'm here not to teach you, but to learn from you what you believe, but what we could do, and what you would recommend to me. What are the best partners on the international scene, NGOs, but also states that would be interested in cooperating in order to accelerate the projects. The seas and the oceans are among the most beautiful of the world's ecosystems, but this is, of course, only one side of the coin. We need functioning marine ecosystems for climate stability as sources of food for billions of men and women in an ever-growing world population, as a recreational area for all of us, okay, that's one aspect, but certainly not the most important. And then when we look at the traditional pressures, where we have almost become used to, as overfishing, shipping, pollution, eutrophication, marine litter, wastewater from land-based sources. And when I remember Jacques Cousteau, where I watched a movie in the late 70s or early 80s about damage that was caused by all these pressures, then I really asked the question, did so much change? Perhaps in around the European sea borders or in some other parts of the world, but certainly not as a general tendency. And then we are facing, the oceans are facing new pressures. Offshore energy from wind farms. That's why I'm in a difficult situation, because on the one hand, we want energy transition to succeed, but then when I'm talking about offshore windmills, in the coastal areas of northern Germany, then I have to address complaints by people defending the rights of Schweinswale. What is it in English? Yeah, okay. Yeah, and other animals in that area. Then we have raw materials, deep sea mining, what I already mentioned, where I was learning 30 years ago on the legal details, but the environmental details seem to me certainly much more important. We need a new balance between use and conservation, and that means, of course, that we have to come to critical decisions. Whenever you try to move the borders between use and conservation, you risk conflicts of interest, and some people would lose, other people would come under pressure, and therefore it is so difficult to achieve progress. But the state of the oceans is critical. You know the facts much more than I do. 90% of the world's goods transport worldwide is by ship. It has negative impacts on climate. It generates air and water pollution. 15,000 shipping movements are registered each year in the fragile ecosystems of the Arctic. It is not my wish to suspend tourism in this region, but we have to find ways to make it more sustainable. And what I have learned from popular media 20 or 30 years ago is the fact that damages to the environment in Arctic regions need so much longer to recover than damages in other areas worldwide. Every year, 6.4 million tons of plastic waste and marine litter is released into our oceans. A couple of days ago, I read an article about a dead fish, something like this, with enormous amount of plastic waste in his stomach. And when it comes to overfishing, we do not need to look so far afield. 80% of all fish stocks in the Mediterranean are overfished or beyond safe biological limits. And we have reports of many areas worldwide where, despite restraints in fishing for many, many years already, the fish has not yet recovered. The fish has disappeared and has not yet recovered. And therefore, protection of the oceans, in my view, is also closely linked to the issue of biodiversity, because I've got the impression that so many dangerous things are going on that nobody can really estimate the real impact on biodiversity in the oceans. And on top of all these pressures we have to deal, I mentioned already, with climate change. This not only endangers marine ecosystems, it is also a threat to ocean current systems. If these continue to weaken, we will lose the main buffer for our world climate. Some people are telling us that as climate change continues, we will see enormous increase of temperatures in some parts of the world, especially in African and Asian countries, but we could face some indirect changes that would lead to cold and snow in Germany and Europe even in spring. So if I look outside, this is not a good sign. It is rather worrying with regard to to climate change. We need international corporations to make sustainability real. Doing our homework in our national waters and on land is necessary but not sufficient. We have to look beyond. 60% of the oceans lies beyond national jurisdiction. We have the legal instrument in UNCLOS, but it is poorly implemented. UNCLOS covers all aspects of the ocean, but it takes an isolated sector-by-sector silo approach, which does not address sustainable management of marine resources. We do not need an overall reform of UNCLOS, but what we need are commitments for an implementing agreement which has an integrated or inclusive approach, which takes the complexity and interdependencies within oceans into account. And it must have clear standards so that implementation can be monitored. The initiative of France on the European level and the broad consensus we have reached in the EU was a great step forward. Now we have to work for a coalition of the committed beyond our EU boundaries. And this is really very important. I have just 15 months, 10 months are almost over until next general election, and I was taken by my domestic responsibilities with regard to energy transition. But I have spent so far 34 days abroad. You cannot be a good minister of the environment when you stay at home all the time. You have to look for international cooperation, and I have now built an excellent personal relationship to Delphine Bateau, my French colleague. I've spent a whole day in Paris recently where we discussed all issues related to transition énergétique, and I will have a trilateral with her and my British colleague at Davy soon in Berlin, and we are doing everything, not just to intensify our European exchange, but we have to involve also others from other parts of the world, and you should tell me to whom I should listen and to whom I should speak. At Germany, we have worked, but we are committed to do more. Germany had a peacemaking role in the OSPAR for the Northeast Atlantic in designating 8 marine protected areas on the high sea, thus forming the world's finest network of high sea MPAs. There are only 2 others, one in the Antarctic and one in the Mediterranean. We have done a lot with regard to the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea has no high sea area, but the Baltic was the first regional sea worldwide where the 10% goal of the marine protected areas decided 2002 in the Johannesburg summit had been implemented, and the WWF has twice recognized Germany for the designation of national marine protected areas in the Baltic and in the Northeast Atlantic. It is, we are certainly not a major marine power, but we have presented 4 years ago a comprehensive national marine strategy. And furthermore, we have designated 45% of our own waters as marine protected areas. This shows that we are at least taking some action. I strongly advocate that Germany and France, as in many other areas, should working together to advance marine conservation. We have already agreed to do this in the field of renewable energies. I told you I have spent a day in Paris. Delphine Bateau will come to Berlin, and energy transition énergétique could become one of the outstanding projects of Franco-German cooperation in the future, like the Airbus, like Ariane in the past. First, we can strengthen our cooperation on the framework of OSPAR to continue in developing more good examples which we can share at global level and demonstrate our commitment. with regard to the implementing agreement in the framework of UNCLOS. We should work together to overcome opposition to this process and form a coalition of the committed to establish a strong pace. I know it is a challenging task, but the common position of the EU forms a good basis. We have excellent experience of working together on climate mitigation, which is no easy field either. Joining with France and the EU to become pioneers in marine protection would enable us to make further progress with other marine nations. Of course, there are many countries that have set the pace for certain aspects of marine conservation. The bilateral activities by France and Germany, initiated by today's workshop, do not aim to exclude other players. On the contrary, we consider ourselves the initiators and invite all interested countries to join us in solving the problems of the high seas. Implementing tools include staggered developments. That means reaching global agreements via regional cooperation. The key is a combined approach, not either or. These are the steps I have already in mind, and I hope to get further input at this workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention, and I'm now very much interested in listening to your advice. Thank you so much.